What's up, guys? It's Gavin from the Fast and Goal podcast. And week one just wrapped up after that Monday night game of TCU and UNC. And now I'm just going to be doing not a podcast episode because Clayton is not here right now, but we're going to be doing a little Heisman odds segment. So we're going to be taking a look at all the Heisman contenders right now, what Vegas thinks, and we're going to rate it on a scale of 1 to 10 based on value. So 10 not necessarily being that they're the most likely to win the Heisman, but 10 being that's the best value, meaning that I think that their odds should be a lot shorter, and 1 being the worst value, and I think that their odds should be a lot longer than they actually are. So let me go ahead and share my screen so we can see these Heisman favorites. Okay. So I think I'm in the way a little bit here. Okay, so right now we have Garrett Nussmeier as the favorite to win the Heisman. You can find him at plus 800 or 8 to 1 odds. So we see his game against Clemson. I brought up in our episode 4 of the podcast about how should be 24-0. Nussmeier should have 2 touchdowns because they called back a touchdown that should have, or sorry, they didn't call a touchdown that should have been called. We see that he had 1 passing touchdown, no interceptions, barely anything on the ground. He was very efficient, 74%, but he only threw 230 yards, which is not horrible, but that's not Heisman winning stats really. Like you're looking for closer to like a 300 average to win the Heisman. But at least he was efficient, no picks. I'm not sh just because he's 1 and 0 and he's on like a top 10 team now, maybe a top 5 team. That's kind of why he's leading this race, just because he's a big name, he's a senior. But I'm not really loving the plus 800 odds. Uh, I mean, I would personally have Carson Beck as my favorite to win the Heisman right now, but I don't mind Nussmeier. I'll give this, I don't want to give it above a 5 because I personally would not want to put anything on plus 800. So I'll give it a 4 because it's definitely possible if LSU ends up going 10 and 2 and he's a solid quarterback, but if he's only going to be putting up 230 yards, especially because I think that there'll be a lot more run heavy this year because Caden Durham had a really good game, and he looks like he could finally be LSU's lead back. They haven't really had a lead back in a while. They've been very pass heavy the last few years because they couldn't find that running back. But I think Caden Durham is going to kind of have a breakout year. They're going to want to run the ball a lot more. 17 carries, 74 yards, and a touchdown. He looked really good in this game. But yeah, 4 out of 10 for Nussmeier there at plus 800. And then we're gonna move on to Sellers at plus 1,000. Let's look at Lenore Sellers' game. He had 209 yards, only 63%, only 1 touchdown in the air, and then he did add 1 touchdown on the ground. It was a very nice run, his touchdown on the ground. His passing touchdown was a bomb to Nick Harbor, a really well-placed ball. But other than his 2 touchdowns, he didn't really impress me at all this game. I mean, Virginia Tech's defense is solid, but not great. Again, only 200 yards, and 64 of them came on 1 touchdown later in the game. So he very well could have finished with 150 this game if Nick Harbor didn't end up getting that open. So, but I do see the potential. We saw his freshman year. He had a great year. You see redshirt freshman. He did it on the ground, did it through the air, kind of came out of nowhere. He's a bigger body, he's fast. He definitely has the star power potential, but I just don't see it with South Carolina really. They didn't show me too much in their win over Virginia Tech to prove that they're an elite team. They have a pretty tough schedule at LSU, versus Oklahoma versus Alabama, at Ole Miss, at A&M versus Clemson. These are all great defenses. I don't know if Sellers can really put up 300 in the air against these guys, if he can continue to not throw picks against these guys. So plus 1,000, he's the second most likely player to win the Heisman. I'm not really buying into it. I'll give this one a 2 out of 10. I like him as a player. I just don't think it's likely he wins the Heisman for the Gamecocks. Our third player is Carson Beck. As I mentioned earlier, I think that he should be the favorite to win the Heisman. Only 205 yards, but if you were watching this game, you could just tell he looked a lot better than last season. He was a much better decision maker. No touchdowns here for him is huge, especially against a great Notre Dame secondary. Definitely a top five, maybe even top three secondary in the country. So he had two touchdowns in the air, only 64%, which is solid but not great. That's a little better than Sellers, not by much at all, really. Um, but yeah, I don't think their running back room is anything great, so I think they're going to continue to be a pass-heavy team this year. I really like number 7 and number 10. Or is Tony 14 or 10? Number 10, yeah. I really like Malachi Tony. I think he's going to be great against a lot of these man defenses that they're going to face. He's a very twitchy guy, a very fast guy. He can help Beck put up massive numbers. And then CJ Daniels had that amazing catch. He had a couple other great catches. But yeah, Carson Beck looked good. Even when he was pressured, he looked good. He put a lot of balls right on the money. He was looking more like his 2023 self. You can tell that he's experienced. You can tell that he likes this new offense with Cristobal. And 27 points against Notre Dame is something to be proud of. I think if this Miami team finishes top 10, maybe 10 and 2, 11 and 1, and Carson Beck continues to be, have this good touchdown to interception ratio, I think he's definitely likely to win the Heisman. So I'm going to give Carson Beck plus 1,200. I'll give him a 7 out of 10. We'll see more 8 out of 10s, 9 out of 10s, 10 out of 10s here later. We get lower on the list because I think that this is still a very, very wide open race, especially with Arch not looking good at all. So we'll move on to player number 4, Gunnar Stockton, the new quarterback for Georgia, replacing Carson Beck. And Stockton only threw, I didn't watch any of this game, so I'm just box score watching here, but he only threw 58%. He had two touchdowns on in the air and two touchdowns on the ground, 73 yards on the ground too, which is pretty impressive. Only 190 yards though, no picks, which is good. So I also like his new receiver, Zachariah Branch. Where is he? Right here. The transfer from USC. He's definitely one of the best receivers in the country. He was highly recruited out of high school. I think if Zachariah Branch can end up being this insane wide receiver one for him, and then you have the big tight end Oscar Delp, kind of reminded me of Brock Bowers. So if you can have those two guys continue to play well, I'm not too concerned about the low completion percentage. It's first game of the season, and he's a newer quarterback, so that's fine with me. No interceptions is great. Four touchdowns is great. I will give, but at the same time, fourth ranked is a little high. Plus 1,600 at ESPN. I'll give this a 5 out of 10. Then we'll move on to Jeremiah Smith. I don't have a whole lot to say here. I think Sayan looked decent, not great. I don't think that he's anywhere near the level of Will Howard, however. 43 yards, nothing spectacular, no touchdowns. I mean, this could potentially just be the way that Texas plays against Jeremiah Smith. We saw he only had 3 yards against them last year. They really just try to limit Jeremiah. That could just be the case, and he could start going off for 100 yards a game after this. But I'm not sure. He had a couple drops that was a little concerning. Sayan missed him when he was wide open once. I don't know if this Sayin to Smith connection is going to be there, kind of like the Will Howard to Smith connection. So I'm going to rank Jeremiah Smith at plus 1800. I'm going to give him a 3 out of 10. Then we'll move on to Arch, plus 2000 at ESPN. And Arch had a horrible game, as we all know. Only 57%, only 170 yards. His touchdown throw was decent, nothing spectacular. The receiver made a really good play on it. He threw an interception, should have been two interceptions. One of them was dropped. 38 yards on the ground. That's kind of expected from him, mid around the 40 yard per game on the ground to average. Um, so yeah, it could have just been the Ohio State defense, first road start, only third overall start, I believe. So I don't think it's completely over. However, I think Texas will be a run-heavy team. They'll be leading a lot of these games, dominating in a lot of these games. I think that the staff is going to see his game against Ohio State kind of completely change the way that they run this offense. I don't know if we're going to see 30 attempts a game. We could start seeing low 20s. They might be running the ball a lot more. They have two great backs. So it's definitely possible, but I just don't think it's likely. So for him to be plus 2000, seems like he should be a little bit longer. Seems like he should be more down with these guys. I'm going to give it a 3 out of 10. For Klubnik, we all know he lost to LSU, only 50%. He missed a lot of his guys. Everybody was bashing him on social media. However, this is still one of the best wide receiver rooms in the country. His 1 through 3 are really, really good. But he had no touchdowns, one interception against LSU, a horrible start. He would really, really have to pick it up and start, throwing a few 400-yard games, a few four touchdown games. And if we look at the schedule, I don't really know. I mean, a lot of it would have to come in the first half. I think Troy's going to be a blowout. I think Syracuse is going to be a blowout. Looks like North Carolina could be a blowout. BC, Duke, Furman. I mean, it's possible, but I think if Clemson's winning, they're not really going to let Cade throw it up. Dabo doesn't really seem like the guy to want to hype up his Heisman campaign. He kind of just wants to win these games, not show the deep or not put a lot out there on film. So I don't know if we're going to be able to see a lot of these 400-yard, four touchdown games to boost up his poor week one performance. I think for him to win, Clemson would probably have to win out, which is possible, but not likely, just because they're bound to slip up SMU, Florida State, at Louisville, at South Carolina. So I'm not totally out on Cade. It's possible, but plus 1600 is really all you can get. It's kind of crazy to me, especially starting 0-1. So I'm going to give it a 3 out of 10. Moneyline Mateer for Oklahoma. His first game was against Illinois State, so we're not going to put too much thought into this, but he was 81%, nearly 400 yards in the air. I didn't see as much on the ground from him as I thought I would, but I think that they're kind of hiding that for this week for Michigan. They don't want to put too much out there on film, you know what I mean? So I think we could see him rush for 70, 80 yards against Michigan, kind of like we saw him doing over there at Wazoo. So yeah, 800 yards on the ground last season at Wazoo, 15 touchdowns on the ground last season at Wazoo. So yeah, he broke that record in his OU debut. Three touchdowns, one on the ground, so four touchdowns, one interception, putting up a ton of yards. Oklahoma has a really, really tough schedule, but if Oklahoma can somehow find a way to go 8-4, we all know Lamar won, and he was only 8-4. He has a lot of marquee games. Michigan will be a big game. Auburn could potentially be a ranked game. Texas, South Carolina, Ole Miss, Tennessee, Bama, LSU. He's going to have a ton of eyes on him. I think he plays with a lot of confidence, plays with a lot of poise. I think it's definitely possible. We just need OU to pull off a lot of upsets. So I'm going to give Mateer, again, he's only plus 16,000, which is a little surprising, but I do like him over Cade. I think I like him over Arch, and I think I even like him over Jeremiah Smith. So I'm going to give John Mateer a 6 out of 10. Then we're going to quickly move on over to Sam Levitt. Let me get this. Okay. We're going to move over to Sam Levitt. He also played an FCS school in his first game of this season. 257 yards, 64%, not horrible, but not great. Two touchdowns in the air, two on the ground, 73 yards on the ground, which is a little surprising, and only one interception. So four touchdowns, one interception, mediocre efficiency, but he did put up a decent amount of yards. Um, Again, this is an FCS opponent, so we're not going to look too much into it, but they're decent stats to start the season off with. Kind of total up some good Heisman numbers touchdown wise. We see he only had five touchdowns on the ground last year, only 400 yards rushing last year. We looks like we're going to see some more this year. So I think with what's his name with their star running back on the Giants, they keep their star receiver Tyson. I think Sam Levitt is definitely definitely has a possibility to win the Heisman. Arizona State is a great team. They could go 10-2, 11-1 there in the Big 12. So yeah, I think if we see another great season out of Arizona State, I think they'll be a lot more pass heavy this season compared to last season, obviously. And he has a real chance at winning the Heisman. So I'm going to give Sam Levitt at plus 1800 a 7 out of 10. I think I like him a little bit more than Mateer, maybe about the same as Mateer, but you get a little bit better odds on Levitt. I think that's where I kind of cut it off after that, and I just have some guys up here that I'm gonna give some good ratings on that I think is very likely to win the Heisman, or not very likely, but people are kind of sleeping on to win the Heisman. And first is going to be CJ Carr, who we see here at plus 6,000, a huge jump from all these other books, a little confusing. This is ESPN bet. So we see CJ Carr plus 6,000. Let's go take a look at his stats against Miami. I think people are going to be down on him right now, so it's important to buy low because the Irish are 0-1. But if you actually watch this game, CJ Carr, after, I mean, he didn't look great in the first quarter, but that's to be expected for somebody who's never even attempted a college pass. So, but yeah, for your first college start, your first college game, to be at Miami and to put up 221 yards and three touchdowns is quite impressive. He did throw a pick. He wasn't super efficient, but again, for the young player, freshman, I believe he's a redshirt freshman, never completed a pass, never attempted a pass. I think he could definitely win the Heisman with his new weapons. We saw Notre Dame believes that this is the best receiving room that they've had in quite a long time. What's his name? Malachi Fields, I believe. Yeah, Malachi Fields out of Virginia. I'm really, really high on this guy. He made a couple great catches on a couple of great throws from CJ Carr yesterday. And yeah, back-to-back 800-yard seasons at Virginia. He could be a good weapon for Notre Dame. It looks like they're going to involve Jeremiah Love more in the passing game. We saw a couple good catch and runs from Love there in the fourth quarter. And yeah, I think CJ Carr has a real shot at winning the Heisman, and you can get him at 60 to 1 odds. So I'm going to give this an 8 out of 10. I think they have a very easy schedule. I don't think that they want to run Jeremiah Love into the ground just because of his concern with the injury from last year. So I think that they'll give Carr a lot of opportunities there and save Love for the postseason. Um, what else can we look at? Okay, next. Devon Dampier, 84%, and this is not against an FCS opponent. 84%, 206 yards, a touchdown on the ground, 87 yards on the ground, two touchdowns in the air, no interceptions. So against UCLA and on the road, Dampier, the transfer out of either New Mexico or New Mexico State. Okay, New Mexico. He looked great. I mean, Utah's offense just in general looked great. Their offensive line gave him some time out there, but then he was also making some plays himself to get this big win over UCLA. I think Utah is just kind of showing that they could dominate this season, which is a little concerning if you're betting on quarterbacks to win the Heisman because you kind of want these close games for them to make these big plays, these big throws. You want them to drop back as much as possible. But they'll run into some tougher opponents. They'll definitely see some ranked teams this season, and he'll have his chance to play on the big stage. Um, so yeah, three touchdowns, no picks, very efficient. First game there for Utah. They looked great. Plus 3,500. I'm going to give this an 8 out of 10. I think his odds could have been a little bit longer, but plus 3,500, I think he definitely has a real shot to win the whole thing. Let's move on to Dylan Raiola. And this is a big name, so I'm not really sure why he's so low on the list. Even preseason, he was really, really low on the list before the win versus Cincinnati. But where's he at? He's way down here at plus 10,000 or 100 to 1. And if we're looking at his stats, he had a really great game, 78.6%, two touchdowns, no interceptions. His long was only 24 yards and he still threw for 243. So he never really had any receivers break out any big long catches for any touchdowns. Only 24-yard long, but he still found a way to throw 243 yards against Cincinnati, a respectable opponent. I don't think that they're going to be horrible this year. I actually heard a lot of good things about Cincinnati as like potential Big 12 sleepers. So I'm gonna go ahead and rank Raiola all the way down at plus 100, or sorry, plus 10,000. I'm gonna give him a 10 out of 10. They have a new offensive coordinator. They're bringing in some new receivers. Like they're definitely upgrading the offense from what they had last year. They're starting off with a win. They could definitely be an 8-4 team there in the Big Ten. And I think Raiola has a non-zero chance to win it. I don't think it's likely by any means, but with the new offensive coordinator, with the new receivers, with this big name prospect, I think it's definitely a possibility. And then we'll move on to Hoover, who I didn't expect to talk about because I just assumed that he would be a lot higher on this list, and I just wasn't going to buy into it with his two receivers from last year off to the NFL. But yeah, I assumed he would be more in this range. And then I was scrolling and scrolling and saw him way down here. Plus 15,000 is the best you can get on him, or 150 to 1, which is really, really insane to me considering he had a great game tonight. He threw 75%, 284 yards, two touchdowns, and only one pick. Um, and if I remember it correctly, I don't think the pick was his fault. I definitely need to look back at it, but I know it's something that kind of got tipped up in the air, if I'm remembering correctly. I could be thinking of a completely different game, or I could be thinking of, I'm not thinking of the Gio Lopez pick. I know that the Gio Lopez pick was bad. I'm pretty sure this one was not really Hoover's fault, but don't quote me on that. But anyways, Jordan Dwyer looked great for them. He made a few like really great catches on some really great throws from Hoover. This North Carolina secondary is actually really, really good. Allen is supposed to be a top 4 round pick. Dixon is supposed to be a top 4 round pick. I think Dixon looked great. He was kind of locking up McAllister for the most part, who was a good receiver for them last year. Only had one catch for 20 yards. I don't think that that'll continue for McAllister. I think he'll, see some worse corners kind of get open a lot more in the future. But yeah, this guy had a drop. Um, but Dwyer looked great. Rogers looked pretty good. And yeah, Hoover 75%, nearly 300 yards. I think at plus 15,000, that is just insane odds. It's hard to pass up on. I know the two receivers are gone to the NFL. These guys aren't supposed to be great, but I also don't think anybody was really expecting Dwyer to be this good. So with Dwyer and McAllister, I think he could throw for another 4,000 yard season. I think last year he was just under that. Yeah, last year just under 4,000 yards. But if he can kind of, I don't really know why people weren't really talking about him last year. 27 touchdowns, 11 interceptions. Maybe he just needs to clean up the interceptions a little bit. If he can have single digit interceptions, closer to 30 touchdowns, I think he could definitely be in the Heisman talks, just like Max Duggan was with Sonny Dykes not too long ago. So, who do we have now? Demond Williams. I've written a whole article on why I think Demond Williams can win the Heisman. Let's go ahead and check his odds. He's plus 9,000, so 90 to 1 odds there for Washington, who beat Colorado State by 17 points. Nothing too impressive. I don't know if Washington can be great this year. Um, but for Demond, he threw 75%, 226 yards, no interceptions, and a touchdown. He added 68 yards on the ground, so a decent game for Demond. I think he has a lot more to show. I think he's going to be getting these attempt numbers up once he's like playing in these close games against the Big Ten. So he's going to have opportunities to have 300 plus yard games. But what I'm basing this off of a lot of is the small sample size that we saw last year. He looked really, really good. In the bowl game against Louisville, he threw 374 yards, 81%, 4 touchdowns, and a touchdown on the ground. So a 5 touchdown and over 400 total yard bowl game. A decent game against Oregon, 85%, 200 yards, 1 touchdown, no interceptions. Just with the flashes that he's shown us last year, I know he's still really, really young, but 90 to 1 odds for the Huskies quarterback. I think Washington just needs to be a competent team, and Demond Williams could potentially carry them to 8-4, 9-3, and be a Heisman contender. And then our last, oh, I'm gonna rank him a 10 out of 10. Or no, I'm sorry. I'm gonna rank him at 8 out of 10. I think plus 9,000 is good, not great. But Hoover, I'll give a 10 out of 10. I don't believe I ranked Hoover. So Raiola and Hoover, 10 out of 10s. Demond is an 8 out of 10. And my last guy that I wanted to talk about was Sawyer Robertson. And we're going to see Sawyer at plus 12,000 or 120 to 1. And Sawyer just had a massive game yardage wise, 419 yards against Auburn. However, he was very inefficient, 56.3%. He did have no interceptions, which is nice. 3 touchdowns, which is nice. And yeah, he's going to be seeing a lot easier defenses than Auburn for the rest of the year. He had a really good year last year. A lot of people raved over him. And yeah, I think he just needs to be a little more efficient. I think if he keeps his interception numbers low, and Baylor is a good team this year, which they definitely have the potential to be. They could be a 10-2 team. They could be playing in the Big 12 championship. Then I think he has a shot to be in the Heisman talks, be in New York come December. So Plus 12,000. I like those odds. I think he has a shot. Mm, I'm also going to give this a 10 out of 10. So my 10 out of 10s are going to be Raiola at 100 to 1, Hoover at 150 to 1, and Sawyer at 120 to 1. These are all guys who can have these 400-yard games. We haven't seen it out of Raiola. We haven't seen it out of Hoover yet. I think if this game was a little bit closer, we would have seen Hoover throw more in the fourth quarter. Could have seen a 400-yard game out of Hoover. But yeah, that's my whole recap of the Heisman race. I think I'll be doing this weekly. I'm going to try to do this as much as possible, kind of give my ideas on these values, and it'll be interesting to look back come December. Thank you guys for tuning in, and I will see you guys next time.